us? We protect us. Who protects us? We protect us.
Welcome, everyone, to another on-the-ground edition of Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor and made possible by the support of listeners like you. My name is Maximilian Alvarez, and I'm here in Washington, D.C., right in front of the U.S. Capitol building, where dozens of local union members and union leaders just held a rally as part of a national Kill the Cuts Day of Action. Similar protest rallies were held today from California to Illinois to New York. Organizers called for the National Day of Action to raise awareness and fight against the Trump-Musk administration's cuts and proposed cuts to federal research, health, and education. As the homepage of the Kill the Cuts website states, quote, by cutting funds to life-saving research and medical care, the Trump administration is abandoning families who are suffering and costing taxpayers billions of dollars. These cuts are dangerous to our health and dangerous to our economy. On Tuesday, April 8th, 2025, workers across the country are standing up and demanding no cuts to education and life-saving research, end quote. The National Day of Action is sponsored by a plethora of labor unions, including the United Auto Workers, the American Federation of Teachers, the American Association of University Professors, the Communications Workers of America, AFSCME, SEIU, the Debt Collective, and more. I came down to the D.C. action to talk to union members about this fight and what their message is to the Trump administration, to the labor movement, and to the public.
All right, for our last speaker, we have got Margaret Cook, who is the Vice President of the Public Healthcare and Education Workers sector of the Communication Workers of America. Let's give it up for Margaret. I'm a little short. Let me move this back a bit. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I am your last speaker, and I promise I won't be like a Baptist preacher. I'm not going to keep you for another hour. My name is Margaret Cook, and I am the Public Healthcare and Education Workers Sector Vice President of Communication Workers of America, representing over 135,000 state, municipal, and higher education workers across the country in Puerto Rico, including thousands of researchers, lab technicians, public health care clinicians, and nurses, and thousands of additional support and wraparound staff, many of whom have seen their work shut down, cut off, and possibly killed by these cuts you've heard from all of these people about today. Cuts that are illegal. Yeah. Cuts that are unethical. Yeah. Cuts that are immoral. Yeah. Cuts that are unacceptable. Yeah. Cuts that are fatal. Yeah. And I don't mean just figuratively. Because as you've heard today, these are cuts to research that will save lives. And so our message is pretty clear today. Kill these cuts before they kill us. I'm proud to stand here today with all these other members and leaders from labor who are going to work each day to deliver care and discover solutions for each and every one of us, which is a lot more than you can say for the people who are doing the cutting. You got the world's richest man on one hand and the world's most arrogant man on the other. These men are living in a fantasy world, which may explain one of the reasons why they are so hostile to science. You know, I've sat back and I've listened to them talk about how they need to cut back on the size of our federal government, and to do so by going on a rampage against these workers who are doing some of the most critical and vital work that our government does. Well, what they aren't telling you, because they're liars and cheats, is that today the size of the federal workforce is the smallest it has been since the Great Depression. at just over 1.5% of the jobs in this country. Years of plundering public dollars for corporate greed, decades of austerity and slashing and burning the public good has left our government smaller than it has ever been. And these jackals aren't done tearing away at it. And for what? Let's cut the crap on the racist dog whistles about DEI. Setting aside, for the sake of argument, the fact that we do need to address inequality and injustice, are you really telling me that the cuts to people working on cancer research is about DEI? That the cuts to people working to deliver vital aid and care is about DEI? I see right through it, and I know you do too. The reality is we need more public investment, not less. Because what is it that our investments really do? What these workers do is they discover, they educate, they provide care, and they prevent and act in emergencies. In labs and research settings across this country, these workers are discovering cures and treatments for diseases that threaten all of us. My grandfather died 2 days ago from stage 4 cancer, and my mother currently has stage 2. In campuses and schools, they're educating and helping elevate the knowledge of future generations. In clinics and hospitals and public service facilities, they're delivering care to people who need it. And in dire straits, from outbreaks of viruses like measles, y'all. These are people who put themselves at risk to protect the rest of us. And that's who Trump and Musk and a bunch of kids without any real world knowledge and experience are trying to fire. Trump and Musk, whose genius lies in putting their name on work and breakthroughs of other people, and then have the nerve to charge rent for it. Well, enough. This money is the public's, and we demand that it be used for the public good. Not 1 penny less. No, I firmly believe for us to meet the incredible challenges and realize the potential of our country, we need so much more public investment. That's why we've got to unite across our unions, across all kinds of work, and across our communities to stand up, speak out, resist these attacks, and defend the services and work we do for the people we serve and work for. Lives are on the line. These cuts are wrong. So I say again, kill these cuts or they'll end up killing us. Thank you.
My name is Matt Brown, and I'm the recording secretary for NIH Fellows United. We're a local of the UAW, number 2750.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for talking to me, man. The Kill the Cuts rally just concluded here. The Senate building is right behind us. But for folks who aren't here right now and are listening to this, can you just say a little bit about what we just witnessed? What brought you guys out here today?
Of course. Yeah, Max, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the pod. And what brought us out here is saving the completely devastating cuts that are currently happening to publicly funded research here in the U.S. At NIH Fellows United, we're members of the intramural scientific team at the NIH that are working on things like curing cancer and making treatments for diabetes. And we're partnering up with all of the folks that are being affected by the cuts to the extramural side of the NIH. So all of the universities and other institutions that receive grants to work on those same things outside of the NIH. And yeah, it's been really great to see all of these people come together to save the life-saving work that we're all doing.
Say more about the extent of these cuts and the impact on research, intra and extramural. Like, I guess give listeners a sense of how deep this goes and what the impacts are really going to be.
This is truly an existential crisis for biomedical research in America. flat out. The cuts to the intramural program have seen thousands of jobs cut from the people that support the science that we do. And on the extramural side, the cuts that we're seeing to grants, these so-called indirect costs, it's a bit of a jargon term that can be hard to parse, but really that goes towards supporting the life-saving research that we do. The cuts that we're seeing are going to decimate the amount of research that we can get done on these awful diseases that people face. And like I said, this is an existential question. It's, do we want biomedical research to continue or not?
And what about, like, let's talk about the flesh and blood workers who are making this research happen and the working people who benefit from that research. Like, who are these cuts actually hurting right now?
These cuts are going to affect every single person. Historically, scientists and researchers have been considered somewhat apolitical, quote unquote, because, hey, who doesn't know somebody that's been affected by cancer, right? It's pretty easy to fund cancer research because it can be so devastating. And so, yeah, everybody's going to be affected by this. It's not just the researchers here at NIH and Bethesda. It's not just the researchers at universities, but it's going to be every single person who has or has known someone with a really awful life-altering disease.
And what's the message? What was the rallying message that we heard here today for folks in attendance and folks who aren't in attendance? Like, what are these unions doing to fight back? And what are you saying to other folks about how they can get involved?
Well, really what I think the rallying call is to look around us. It's look at who are the people that are trying to save each other's lives here. It's the organized workers that are involved in biomedical research around the country. We're not hearing things from NIH leadership. We're not hearing things from university leadership. We're hearing things from the organized researchers who are getting their butts out here to try to save what we do. And that's really what this is it's about getting as many people out here as possible and all moving in the same direction to not just save our jobs and not just save science, but to save lives around the country.
And last question, I mean, like, there were a number of different unions present here and represented here. What does it mean that this is like such a crisis that it is bringing together different sides of the labor movement and uniting around a common fight?
Absolutely. And that's a very special question to me because as NIH Fellows United, we're one of the unions that was part of organizing this, as well as reaching out to other universities, one of them being my former bargaining unit with Teachers and Researchers United, which is local of UE 197. And so, yeah, it's been really special to see people come together and not just start organizing the workers in their own workplaces, but reaching out to everybody else in their own regions, in their own careers, and making sure that we're all pointed at the same thing, which is saving lives. This is obviously not some sort of move towards government efficiency, right? That everything that the Trump and Musk administration is doing right now is entirely done to antagonize workers and make us feel like we're hopeless. But things like today show us that we're not, and we need to continue doing things like this long into the future to make sure that they can't move on with their destructive agenda.
So hi, my name is Rakshita Balaji. Currently, I am a post-baccalaureate fellow, a researcher at the NIH. So what that means is I've been spending the last almost 2 years now, post-graduation from getting my undergrad degree, working at the NIH and getting training in order to prepare myself for success in my next step of my career stage, which is to go to graduate school. And I'll be a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania coming this fall. And so what I'm interested in is neuroscience research, and that's what my career trajectory has been so far.
Oh, yeah, well, congratulations on your acceptance and good luck. You know, we need you out there. For folks who are listening to this who only see an acronym when they hear NIH, like, you know, I'm not asking you to sort of describe everything that goes on there, but could you just give folks a sense of like who actually works in the NIH and like what kind of work is being done there?
Yeah, this is a great question, and a question I actually had myself when I was young and going into the NIH or the National Institutes of Health. I was 22 when I joined, and I actually also had no idea what goes on behind those gates. And it turns out what I've learned so far is that the NIH is full of awesome people who are passionate about their work, but they're also not maybe the scientists you think of in the media that work isolated in a lab in an ivory tower doing crazy experiments. These are people who have families, people who have loved ones who have been affected by diseases, and people who really want to make a difference in healthcare in America. And so I just want to first make the point that the NIH is full of regular people who just happen to love what they do and love science, just like everyone in this country is passionate about what they work on. And so the National Institutes of Health is comprised by a bunch of different sub-institutes. So they'll work on things like allergies and diseases, cancer, pain, neuroscience, looking at neurodegenerative diseases, looking at aging. There's a bunch of different types of research that's going on in order to sort of serve every subset of someone's health profile and all of the different types of diseases or different afflictions that people can have throughout the US. And what's also really special about the NIH in particular is their ability to use their knowledge and their resources to target diseases and conditions that are not necessarily as prevalent. So, for example, like rare diseases where people oftentimes don't always find care in their own physician settings or don't always find the right answers, just going to the doctor that doesn't have the research or the exploratory privileges that people do at NIH. So, for example, we look at diseases where the population of people that suffer from them can be so small, yet they don't go ignored because our clinical center has people who are specialized in learning about specific genetic mutations or specific I think that's like, specific genetic mutations, for example, or specific diseases that don't always get studied. And so the NIH not only tries to serve the general public in terms of looking at complete profiles of people's health, but they also can target their resources to looking at things that oftentimes go under the radar and give care to people who oftentimes don't find answers whenever they go to the doctor. And they actually find those answers in possible treatments at the NIH.
And could you tell folks listening, like, what these cuts, what the everything DOGE and the Trump administration are doing, like, what does this all look like from your side of things? And like, how are you and your colleagues been responding to it? Like, what do you want folks on the outside to know about what it looks like on the inside?
Yeah, so the first thing that really comes to mind when I was thinking about these cuts, especially what's happened February 14th, April 1st, it's almost like a trapdoor. You're sort of walking into work, you're getting prepared, maybe you got your kids ready for the day, maybe you got up and made breakfast and lunch and you made sure that everyone was ready. You got into work and suddenly the floor just falls apart beneath you because you no longer have access to your work email. You no longer have access to your data. You are no longer as appreciated as you thought you once were as a federal employee. And all of a sudden, you are left stranded without a job, maybe on administrative leave, not knowing if you'd have the chance to come back. And it sort of is almost like a disappearing act, is what it really felt like, for no apparent reason. And that's the worst part. To hear that the numbers are the most important thing. How many people can they get rid of? How many people can they actually eliminate? Rather than thinking about how many lives are actually just being torn from underneath people. That's kind of all I can describe it as. It's a really strange disappearing act. You don't know, we had the manager of our building, someone who takes care of our building when we have leaks or have issues with our labs, be fired on this random day and then reinstated the next. It's all very chaotic. And this chaos is preventing us from actually being able to move forward with our work, which might have been the goal, but actually ends up harming way more people than just us doing the work, but the people that we're trying to serve. So that's the best way I can describe it. It was immediate, it was forceful, and it was completely and utterly uncalled for. I mean, we had people who were dedicated employees for over 10 years, 20 years, just suddenly say, I'm no longer able to come in. People who couldn't even email anyone telling anyone that they were fired and had to shoot text to people that they knew because they were immediately locked out of their computer. I mean, it just felt like a huge slap in the face.
And, I think like the response from so many people, has been fear and shock. And it's almost been immobilizing because, there's so many executive orders, so many cuts, so much bad news hitting us day after day, which we know is part of the quote unquote flood the zone strategy, right? But what we are seeing, especially in recent weeks, is anger, mobilization, organizing and the coming together like today of different unions, right? So there are different kinds of actions that folks are taking, whether it be going to these town halls and screaming at their elected officials or writing emails or doing mass protests. What we're seeing here today is more about like what unions and what workers can do when they come together with their labor power to fight this. So I was wondering if you could like just talk a bit about that. Like, what is the message here about like what workers and unions in these agencies and what the labor movement can do to fight back against the Trump agenda?
Yeah, so I think the first word that comes to mind is solidarity. I mean, we've now seen that an ultimate betrayal take place from our own employers and from our own administration, showing us that we're not valued. And so the only solace and the primary solace that I think is the most powerful is within one another. So we come into work, the morale has been extremely low. It feels like you're trudging through molasses, just trying to get from one day to the other. And really all you can do with all that pent up frustration in order to not let it, implode you, is to actually share it with others and to bring community about it. And I think the most important thing that our union has brought about is that sense of solidarity, that sense of information, connection, network, especially when the actual protocol for all of these things has been so unclear, going from a fork in the road to a RIF, more acronyms, might I add. The only place that we can really get answers is by sharing information and having open lines of communication with one another. And so the community that we fostered, I think that's our strength. And that's what we want to preserve through all of our labor movements and unions, is to understand that knowledge is power and we're not afraid to share it with one another. We're not afraid to speak the truth time and time again and to talk about our experiences, and we will not be shut behind a door and left out of this conversation anymore.
And what comes next, I guess, for folks listening to this? What's your message about, why now this is the time to get involved and what they can do?
I think with regards to when is the time, my only answer would be when else is the time. This whole period of time since the inauguration has felt like an avalanche. Like you mentioned, it's a barrage of information that usually makes little to no sense and has harmed so many people. So what other time do we have, I think, is the only question I'd have. When else do we come out and do this? As we need to be active and keep pushing back in the moments that things are happening. And that's how change occurs. What people can do, I think, if you're hopefully angry, just like we are, you can call your representatives, keep telling them the stories, especially if you have been a victim of these removals from your job, or a victim of the lack of funding for your research, or even like how this administration has been shaking up your life. Those are important stories. Your story is as important as everyone else's, and to not undervalue the power of your voice, whether it's calling your representative, showing up to these protests, being in unison and harmony with other people, because not only will you find solace in that, but you'll create strength. And to look and try to plug into your local communities as well, because typically you're not the only one who's going through this, and you can definitely find people who are willing to help you, willing to give you information, and speak up. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions, whether it's about, regardless of, for example, like, if you're worried about things related to your immigration status, if you're worried about things related to how your funding's going to work, how you're going to receive, are you going to receive a pension? These questions that have gone unanswered, echo it as much as you can, because through those echoes, you'll find answers within other people, and eventually those echoes will be heard by people who can do more to help make a change and actually protect us from these kinds of ridiculous actions. And again, if you're angry, I think anger only will boil up inside of you if you let it fester. So the best thing to do is to release it at places like this, find local movements, do some searching and look for places you can actually get your voice heard. And I promise that you don't need to feel like you need to be someone special with a name, or an acronym that helps you move forward. Just let yourself be heard and give yourself grace during this time too. And I hope that together we'll be able to make this change together. Don't lose sight of the power we have within one another. When it feels like we're being towered over, we actually are on an even playing field if we have each other. And we can begin to even that out in numbers, if not in position.
My name is Amanda Dykema, and I am a shop steward with AFSCME Local 1072 at the University of Maryland College Park.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much for talking to me today. I know you got a lot going on and the crowd is dispersing, but I wanted to ask if you could just tell us a bit about what we just witnessed here and like what brought all these folks out here to DC today.
Yeah, well, I think you saw people from all kinds of different unions and different kinds of workplaces who are all impacted by the same thing, which is these cuts that are happening to research and medicine and scientific innovation and education, and they are hitting all sectors. And what we're seeing is at the University of Maryland, faculty's grants that were approved and have been ongoing for years being abruptly terminated with no cause. We're seeing faculty grants that went in last year not being reviewed on review panels. And we're seeing cancellation of programs that have had huge impacts for things like expanding the STEM pipeline to people who have been historically excluded from it.
And what's the on the ground impact of this? Like, what would you want folks to know who are maybe just hearing about that and they're saying, oh, that's good. That's eliminating waste. It's getting rid of woke programs. Like, what do you want folks to know about what these cuts are actually doing to your members and the people who benefit from their work?
Yeah. So my members at the University of Maryland, we support all university services. You can see my t-shirt says we run this university, right? And so what it does for our members is those of us who work for research centers are concerned about the futures of their jobs. And for our students, we're seeing student workers who are being let go because the funding's not there anymore. For students who were looking for careers in these sectors who came to the University of Maryland to learn how to do this kind of research, if a research lab gets shut down, they're not able to learn how to do that. They're not able to prepare for grad school. They're not able to go on. But mainly what we're seeing is a chilling effect that faculty, students, and staff really have to work together and get organized to fight against. They want people to stop this kind of research. They want people to be scared. And we're here to get organized and work together so that we can fight against that.
What are the long-term effects if that doesn't happen? Like if these things go through unchallenged, what are the long-term effects going to be for the University of Maryland specifically and higher ed in the United States more broadly?
That's a big question. I'll give it my best shot. The University of Maryland is a preeminent public research university. It's the flagship of the state. And we have hundreds of millions of dollars of research funding every single year. And it funds all kinds of work. We heard today from a climate scientist. I work really closely with a lot of people in the College of Education who do work on K-12, and we have researchers in the humanities, in history, in museums, in data science. All of those agencies that fund that type of work have been subject to significant cuts. And those people will not be able to do their jobs, or they'll be a greatly reduced scope. And the trickle-down effect, or the very obvious effect of their research, and when it comes to broader impacts on society, we're not going to see those things. We're not going to learn what is the best way to teach kids, what is the best way to create climate resilient communities. We're not going to learn those things if we don't have this research funding.
So what was the message today about how workers and unions can fight back? I mean, it was really powerful to see so many different unions represented here.
Yeah.
And so that in itself seems significant. But I guess, where does it go from here? What can rank and file folks listening to this do to get involved?
Yeah. Well, the number one thing, I'm going to say it every time, is get organized. If you have a union at your workplace, join it. We're more powerful together. If you don't have a union at your workplace, work on getting one, because we're not going to be relying on whether it's the president or whether it's university administrators. We can't rely on them to protect us. We have to work together to protect ourselves. But otherwise, the thing I really heard today was a lot about medical advances and people's health. We're going to see if someone, is not familiar with a research university, they might not know what this means. But if they go to their doctor and there's not a clinical trial available for their diagnosis, they're going to see what it means. And so I think what we're trying to do now is reach out to our legislators who, the thing I haven't said so far is that research is a huge economic driver for every state in this country. And so we're reaching out to our legislators to say not only on its merits should this research be funded, but this is going to gut communities. This is people work in these labs and then they go and they spend their paychecks in their hometowns. And so what we're asking is for people to understand that this isn't a kind of an ivory tower thing that only impacts universities. It's a thing that impacts everyone in this country. Senator Markey talked about health doesn't care if you're rich or poor, right? And so people need to realize how this will impact them and their loved ones.
I mean, I was a PhD student at the University of Michigan, which is like the largest or one of the largest employers of that entire state.
Exactly. I'm from Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
Not that your listeners will care. But yes.
Well, and any final messages that you have, because we are also at the same time that these cuts are being pushed through, experiencing a violent, vicious state crackdown on the very right to dissent against such things, to speak out against such things.
Yes.
And universities are becoming the flashpoint for that war on free speech.
Well, I think the other reason we're all here today, the people who came to this rally, we work at agencies like NIH and institutions like the University of Maryland, and we have to pressure our administrators to stand strong in the face of this. Trump clearly wants to stifle free speech, but what is a university if not a place where people learn and grow through free speech, expression, and exposure to ideas? And so if that's really our value, we have to call upon not only our legislators, but our administrators at these institutions to stand strong.
All right, gang, that's going to wrap things up for us this week. I want to thank the guests who spoke with me today. It's cold out here in D.C., and I'm about to head back home to Baltimore. But I also want to thank you all for listening, and I want to thank you for caring. We'll see y'all back here next week for another episode of Working People. And if you cannot wait that long, then please go explore all the great work we're doing at the Real News Network, where we do grassroots journalism like this that lifts up the voices and stories from the front lines of struggle. Sign up for the Real News newsletter so you never miss a story, and help us do more work like this by going to therealnews.com/donate and becoming a supporter today. I promise you, it really makes a difference. I'm Maximilian Alvarez reporting from Washington, D.C. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Solidarity forever.
In my face you no longer see. I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever we go, we are going to roll the Union on the song. I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever hungry are we. Just as hungry can be. The song, I live on, yes, I live on. Where mean things are happening in this land, it's read a song. I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the book mean things are happening in this land is read, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the videotape of me is shown, I live on, yes, I live on. If I have help to make this a better world to live in, I'll live on, yes, I'll live on. When my body is silent and in some lonesome grave, I'll live on.